I did want to talk about the current state of, I guess, evidence-based content online and the overall message that's going out. You know, obviously, I'm a big fan of your work. I love your YouTube channel. I love your presence in podcasts, which is why I obviously wanted to have you on mine. But I feel like, and this might just be Gen Z, but there's so many accounts coming up where they've just absolutely lost the plot, in my opinion. They're like wearing mouth guards and like doing like eccentrics and just like squeezing, or they're saying like, this is not optimal. This is how you do a curl. And obviously they're young, so they're not going to have much muscle mass, but they literally don't even look like they lift. And then they're developing all these big followings. And even if they are kind of, you know, in the world of looking like they lift, the message is like so specific that I feel like they're missing the bigger picture. And I feel like on the other end, you know, there's the old school meathead bodybuilding, which is like just, you know, Tom Platz it and just like go for it and just absolutely murder yourself every session, where I think, you know, that may not be the best advice for everyone to consume, because then they'll just get injured, or they'll be like kind of, you know, every kind of 50, 60-year-old at the gym that's been lifting heavy for ages and they can hardly walk properly. But like, what's your opinion on where it's heading, and what do you think we can learn from both sides?
Yeah, so I think what has happened since, say, the 90s with evidence-based fitness, speaking as someone who was kind of in the first to second batch, if you will, of actual evidence-based people in fitness, I think evidence-based fitness, or what's now science-based lifting, mainly due to Jeff Nippert, I think, has become too popular and is now getting a backlash. So evidence-based fitness used to be a very niche of a niche, and then it became too mainstream. And as it became more mainstream, it attracted a lot of people that are tangentially evidence-based. So many of the people that you're citing, they're not actually evidence-based. They're not following scientific guidelines for evaluating evidence and making claims. They are identifying as science-based, but they are reaching way too far with their recommendations, and they are extrapolating from the science far beyond the point that the actual evidence allows. And that gives a bad reputation to science-based lifting and evidence-based fitness as a whole, which is, I think, undeserved, because nobody's going to a hospital and say, look, I want that medication that has not been scientifically tested. I want the one where people just say it's good, even though the evidence says it doesn't work, right? Fitness is the same. It's, in the end, kind of medicine. It's part of biology, and science is simply the best way to answer a question. Science is like no nonsense, rational thinking taken to uncommon levels. And honestly, that's all what science is. It's like measuring things, seeing how it performs, and thinking everything through very well. So almost all the kind of no nonsense, no bullshit lifters, they do the same, but not to the same extent. Like, everybody agrees that if you look at one individual and they say this works, okay, but if you look at 20 individuals, it's better. And we also agree that if they just did their circumference measurements, or they just, trust me, bro, like I am doing better, we think it's better that if you measure muscle growth. And we think it's better if you use an MRI machine, because we have evidence that the MRI machine has higher precision than the ultrasound. And then if you do all of those steps and, you do the randomization, you get to a scientific study. So scientific studies are just common sense taken to uncommon levels. And there is no dispute that evidence-based thinking is the way to answer a question in the best way. The only problem right now is that what is evidence-based has become very diluted. So actual scientific guidelines, what you could publish in a scientific paper and get through peer review, has become the niche of the niche of the niche of people that actually are in the science-based lifting community. And many of them are simply not truly evidence-based. So it's become very difficult to identify like who is actually evidence-based and who is not. And I think this is a general problem with social media, where we have information overload and it's very hard to filter. So that's where we are now. And where is this going? Well, I mean, evidence-based fitness is not going anywhere, but I think we are in the backlash phase, and we're not out of the depth yet.
Is that why you're diving deeper into studies, like you recently announced, like that you're funding your own studies and you're diving deeper into it? Is that big? Well, not necessarily diving deeper into it. You've always been in the weeds, but I guess like playing more of an active role. Is that because you want to be more at the heart or at the center of evidence-based fitness as opposed to, just being on the content level, but actually being in the research?
Yeah, I think we can do better. Like I've always been part of the research, but I'm making it a bigger part now and more systematic part. So I think we can do as an industry better, and we have a lot of people that are really passionate and that they also have actually the ability to fund things. So I've personally funded quite a lot of research, and people like Brad Contreras, Mike Israetel, they've also given a lot of their personal money to research. And that's amazing. Like what other industry do we have that we have people that are so passionate and they have the means to actually do our own research in a way that we want it for our target audience. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm definitely going to continue on that route. And by and large, I'm just doing my own thing, and like reach and everything is way down compared to last year when science-based lifting was still in the big uptick period. But that's, I think, just a phase, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I trust that evidence-based fitness is only going to grow. Like we get more knowledge, it's just become, it's certain things that we now call part of evidence-based fitness, they're just going to be mainstream knowledge in 10 years.
So what are things that are on the forefront of your mind at the moment in terms of studies that you want to see?
We still the whole lengthened partials idea. That's and training at longer muscle lengths. That's just extremely interesting because some studies find big effects and show that, okay, this exercise outperforms this exercise by a wide margin. But there's also a lot of other research that contradicts it, and we don't exactly know the mechanism. So we don't have a unifying theory yet of like what is causing the greater growth at longer muscle lengths. Is it mechanical tension? That's my theory number one. And then the next step is, okay, so how do we start quantifying the active plus passive tension component so that we can actually predict like this exercise does make sense to do at longer lengths, but this one does not. And I have some theories, but we do need a lot more research on this. And we are seeing an explosion of research on this front to the extent I think that a lot of other people are already a little bit sick of it.
Yeah, well, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask about. Like, do you think that we've kind of lost ourselves in this whole deep stretch? Like, obviously, Dr. Mike was copying a lot of shit on, like, just kind of obsessing over it, like with the lying dumbbell bicep curl. And, everyone's like, what's this guy doing? Because he can't use much weight or, and then like every exercise was like, oh, how do we make this a deep stretch? Because that means it's going to be better. And then everyone was kind of, going, oh, you just need to shut up and train hard or, having other effects and opinions. What's your current stance on it in practically implementing it in a program? Is it try to make it deep stretch, or is it try to see what works for you, what feels best? What do you feel, gives you a better pump, or what do you feel, works best for your body or leads to less injury? I know this is a very kind of like open question, and you said that it hasn't been resolved, but where are you currently standing on it? Because I'm playing around with it too. And I never really used to think about it as much until it came up when you and the others were talking about it.
I think it's the main thing that we know is that everyone already knew full range of motion is better than partial range of motion. And now we know it is specifically because of the extra range of motion at longer lengths. It's not the range of motion at shorter lengths, it's the extra range of motion at longer muscle lengths. And now we're figuring out, okay, so is it that more is always better? No, it does not seem to be. Is it super consistent? Like every exercise always benefits, trained, untrained? No, also doesn't seem to be. So now we're figuring out like what is the context in which the extra muscle length matters. And I think almost every program should have at least one exercise that targets every muscle at a long length. And I think it's just a general good principle to target muscles across their entire length with the whole program. Beyond that, certain exercises lend themselves well to lengthened partials if you can use more weight, which is a proxy for that the lengthened part was otherwise being understimulated. Like in a leg extension or a calf raise, which is, by the way, the two exercises where we have the most compelling evidence for lengthened partials. It makes a lot of sense because a normal leg extension machine, this depends on the machine, but a normal machine has a pronounced sticking point at the top, right? There's this point, just like a row, where at the top you just can't straighten your like 100% anymore, but you can still go like 95 and then 90 and then 85. So there are a lot of these extra reps that you could do, but they're not quite full reps. So if you just stop at full range of motion, then you're leaving a lot of kind of mechanical tension on the table. And if you do half reps, then you actually see like, you can do way more reps or you can use substantially more weight. And I think the total tension area under the curve, so tension by time, is going to be higher because you're just at a higher tension area. You're not limited by the low amount of tension that you can produce with the leg straight. So these exercises, which again in practice you can kind of identify by being able to do way more if you're not super strict on a high range of motion, like a row. Like if you get the elbow all the way behind the body, you fully touch the implement to your chest, you can do way fewer reps than if you just kind of row until your elbow is kind of in line with the body. And this also biomechanically makes sense based on the strength curve of the lats. So I think it makes sense to do it there. But then even then, I would not do your entire program with it. And that's because if you only train at one length, you get all the fatigue in that part. Like we know that injuries are bound to have a high specificity. So you get injured from repetitive strain, by and large. And if you only do like one part of the range of motion, then you're overloading that exact part all the time, which probably increases injury risk. We know that fatigue is part range of motion specific. So if you only do that range of motion, then you get all of your fatigue there. Might limit your total capacity to handle volume. And practically a very big one is that progressive overload is very difficult to implement with lengthened partials and the like. Like it's already difficult with a leg extension, but if you know that the leg goes kind of horizontal, you can be like, okay, that was the rep. And maybe you can keep going after you stop counting for progress when the leg is no longer horizontal.
Yeah.
But when you're like, it's like 45 degrees,
how
are you going to track that? Yeah, it doesn't work. So that I think is an argument to at least do the first set with full range of motion, and then maybe your later sets with lengthened partials, and then you use the first set as a benchmark set. So that's just a practical way to know that you're implementing progressive overload, which is important because if you don't know if you are progressing, then you don't know how to adjust your program or whether to adjust it at all, because you don't want to fix what isn't broken.
Yeah, that was one of my pickles that I had with lengthened partials, just as a, I guess, intensity technique or something that you can do in the gym. Was just like, number one, it's so fatiguing. So I feel like if you're doing it on every set, it's really going to diminish how much you can do in the following sets unless you have a very substantial rest period. So once again, that eats into time. But secondly is the measuring. So what I did is I use it. I prefer to do like my standard sets, let's say full range of motion always. I've always been a big fan of full range of motion. I think it just makes sense. But then with the lengthened partials, I would do it like on the final set and just basically just crank it out until I can't do anymore, because then I'm not doing that exercise anymore and I found that I was still able to train efficiently, but then still kind of get that last set effect of the lengthened partials. Do you think that's a smart way to do it? And has there been research on like how it affects subsequent sets after it, or not really?
Not that much, no. But that's almost exactly how I teach it to my students and clients. Like for most exercises, I start full range of motion to benchmark performance, and then in the later sets or just the last set, I do lengthened partials. And I think you get most of the benefit. Like we do see in research that if you are targeting the muscle at long lengths in some way, and then you add more to it, you get very little additional effect. So we see big effects when it's like an exercise that's just purely training the muscle at shorter lengths, and you look at another exercise at longer lengths. But then when you have an exercise that's already very good at long lengths, adding even more long length focus on that, for many muscle groups at least, doesn't seem to have a lot of additional effect.
So then in that case, does it work the other way, where if you're doing a longer length muscle group exercise, then doing like shortened partials, or is that not as beneficial? Because that kind of seems like how it would yin the yang of, doing a shortened exercise with lengthened partials. Does it work the other way around as well?
I think a different exercise, at least. I think if you do the same exercise just at shortened lengths, it's still too close. So the fatigue is still too high, still very high overlap in fatigue. But if you do another exercise, then that makes sense. So if you have multiple exercises in the same day, I think it makes sense to do one at shorter lengths, one at longer lengths. But in general, erring on the side of full range of motion exercises that train the whole length, just one being very, like a fly or a pullover, and the other being more like a pull down or a more standard exercise.